Welcome back. So, I've been mentioning Flexbox many times now, but now it's finally time to start using it for the very first time. Now, before I actually explain you what Flexbox actually is and how exactly it works, I want to start by actually using it a little bit in practice. And to learn the very basics of Flexbox, actually the context of a project like this is not ideal. And so we will learn it a little bit in isolation. So actually you need some files now from the starter files of this section. So let's come here, which remember is this folder that I downloaded from GitHub. And then here in the starter files for this section, so CSS layouts, grab this flexbox.html and the CSS grid.html, and then copy them into the folder that you are currently working in. And so in my case, that is here on the desktop, this one. So let's paste them there and make sure that it really is inside of the folder that you're currently working in VS Code. So otherwise, everything else I show you will not work. And now if we go here to our sidebar, then indeed, here we now have flexbox.html. And so this is kind of a starter file, so we can quickly learn just the very basics of Flexbox in isolation. Okay, so now in order to access them here in our browser, let's actually go back to index.html, which is this page here, right? And then up here in our navigation, maybe you remember that we actually set some links there. So this one that says Flexbox and CSS grid. And so here I will now actually connect these HTML files. So right now this link points to nowhere, but now I actually wanted to go to flexbox.html. And then the same thing here for CSS grid. All right. And so now if we come here to our page and click on Flexbox, it will go to that flexbox.html file that we specified. So it is still at this URL here, and then /flexbox.html. All right. And so that is, again, this file right here. So here I have some starter code. So basically this container element, which contains these 8 elements in there. And so all of them have a different background color as I defined up here. All right. And so now let's come here to this element called container and let's start using Flexbox. And it's actually very simple. So all we have to do in order to get started with Flexbox is to use the display property and set it to flex on some container element. And with container element, I simply mean any element that has a couple of child elements. So just like this one. But of course, it could have any other class name here. So we already knew the display property, but now we got a new value. And so again, the one that we want is to set it to flex. So give it a save and let's see what happens. And immediately it looks different, right? So all these elements are now immediately side by side without having to use any floats or anything like that. And these elements here, we call them the flex items because they are the child element of the flex container. So again, this element here is the flex container and these 8 child elements are the flex items. All right. Now here, each of these elements occupies exactly the space that it needs for its content. And so you see that actually we don't have enough space here. So let's give us actually some more space. So something like this. Or maybe to make it easier, we could just make the text a little bit smaller. And so now you can see that each of the flex items needs a lot less space. And by the way, this gray space that you see here after the last flex item is simply the background color of the rest of the empty container. So that's this color here. All right. So let's see if we now have enough space. And yeah, that looks nice. Can increase that a little bit more again, even 34. And yeah, so now we're good to go. Now, again, horizontally, each of these elements takes up exactly the space that is necessary for its text content. However, vertically, things are a bit different. So vertically, by default, all the flex items are as tall as the tallest element, which in this case has 150 pixels, because we set this third one, so the green element, with a height of 150 pixel. And if we change this like to 250, then you would see that all of them grow taller. And if this wasn't present here at all, then in the end, all of them would simply also have the height to occupy only the space that's necessary for the content. But let's actually put this back, because this can be helpful to demonstrate a couple of different things. So in order to demonstrate just how powerful Flexbox can be, let me show you one of its most useful applications, which is vertical centering. So to basically center all these items vertically, all we have to do is to say align items and then simply center. And let's see what happens. And indeed, they are now vertically aligned, just as expected. So the flex container still takes the height of the highest element, which is still this one of 150 pixels, but now all the other ones simply take the space that they need for the text, or in general for the content, and then they get vertically aligned in the center. Let's try another one here. So to put them at the very start, we use flex start like this, and to put them at the bottom, we use flex end. All right. And by default, the value of align items is stretch. And so now we will see exactly the result that we had at the beginning. So stretch essentially means that all the elements will automatically stretch as tall as the tallest element. All right. But let's actually put it back to center, because this is one of the most important applications of Flexbox. Just imagine how hard it would be to do this without Flexbox. So we would have to manually select all of these elements except for the green one, and then kind of try to guess some margin at the top so that they then looked aligned in the center. But here it all happens automatically. And of course, we can also center them horizontally. So basically center all of these items inside of the flex container. So we do that with justify content and set it to center. And you see that now the space here is the same on this side and on this side. And so that means that they are now centered inside of the container. But actually, this property here, so justify content, that is part of the Flexbox specification, gives us a couple of other really helpful and nice options here. So for example, we can also say space between and watch what happens then. So you see that basically the remaining space is now distributed evenly between all of these elements. So basically they have now this space which is the same between all of them. So you see here and here and here, and it's really all the same in all the places. All right. And we will actually go a lot deeper into all of these properties, and there are of course a lot more, but for now I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of how we can get started using Flexbox. So maybe and hopefully you start seeing how powerful this is. And so now that we know the basics, let's get a high-level overview of all the properties that are part of the Flexbox specification in the next lecture.